Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back to another conversation between the Let's Talk Destiny format and my number one prince, every time I speak with him, I'm blessed again, over and over again. So our conversations generally center around the concept of the impact of incarceration on families. And so, as we continue these conversations, we discuss topics that affect him behind the wall and me and families on this side of the wall. So, today we want to talk about the Black church as it is a staple of our community. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. First of all, I want to welcome you back to the platform and thank you once again for having these conversations with me. So basically, the question that I have that I want us to talk about today is we constantly are inundated and bombarded with situations in our community that include violence against each other, that include state-sanctioned murders by police officers that go without consequences or any repercussions. And then because the church is a staple, not just in the Black communities, but the brown communities as well. Churches, temples, mosques, spirituality is a staple in most Black and brown communities. So whenever there's a tragedy or something like that, we turn to our churches or places of worship or houses of spiritual nourishment. But my question to you is, where is the Black church in the midst of all of this? Not just during crises, but in general. Where is the church?
Well, quite frankly, church is sitting within a building with their noses up in the sky, too busy trying to tap dance and please the slave masters instead of focusing on the spiritual, moral principle of being a follower of Christ, which is to get out and help those who need it the most. And a part of helping those who need it the most, speak out against corrupt government, corrupt priests, false prophets, etc. And they're hiding in these churches because they're more concerned with filling their pocket, gaining some kind of funding through the government instead of doing what it is they profess to believe in and profess to live. So that's where the church is.
I absolutely agree. I was thinking about, the fact that even though we have more churches, more church buildings, I should say, than ever, there seems to be less positive community impact and influence. And I was thinking back to a conversation that you and I had recently where you mentioned that when you were growing up, even though your family, your grandparents, what have you, were preachers in the community, your involvement in the street, quote street, unquote street, even during that part of your life, it was a prevalent understanding that even the biggest drug dealers knew who your grandparents were and respected them. They wouldn't say certain things in their presence. They wouldn't do certain things in their presence. And I know for a fact that there were some who even sent money to put in the offering at the church. They would say, I'm not coming in there, but I want to give to you all because you are doing stuff in the neighborhood. You also mentioned to me during our conversation that there were drug dealers and those, working in the street who were protecting your grandparents and the church building and so forth without them even knowing about it. Explain that to me a little more. Let's go into a little deeper conversation about that respect.
Okay, well, even to this day, like right now, where we've gotten older, many of us, as far as the men and women that you're speaking about from the neighborhood, even now, they remember my mom and papa, as they call them, Reverend Green and Pastor Green. But they remember them, and they remember because my mom and papa wasn't sitting in a building fooling around. They were out in the community. They were going to these brothers and sisters' house. They can remember them coming in their homes, speaking to their parents, paying their bills. They can remember the program that was going on in the community. I remember times when we would go to amusement parks, things like that, and it would be a church function. But whether the people were coming to church or not, anybody in the neighborhood would come. And my mom and papa would literally pay for their way and out of their own pocket, might I add. Because as we know how things have ended up, they were in debt more than they were not.
Right.
This is something that we might have found out later on, but this is something many of you listeners may not even know. Because many of you even had your hand out. So you know full well what we're talking about when we talk about people really living to the moral principle of what we're discussing. And so this type of love and respect from the people can only come when you serve the people. And my mom and papa were known to serve the people.
Yes.
They weren't just receipt offers and, selling people a bunch of hope. No, many times people who wouldn't even give an offering was coming right after with their hand out, saying they needed food, they needed clothing, they needed whatever, and they would always get it. So I don't recall ever hearing about the church being broken into, and everybody who knew where the church was, that it was built and where it's built. This might be one of the worst parts of time. But not once did you ever have to worry about anybody coming on those grounds and messing with people's cars, messing with the building, or disrespecting anybody who came out of there. And that was the direct result of the leadership of my mom and papa serving their community.
Absolutely, because they, like you said, they didn't sit inside the church building saying, y'all come, but they actively did what the Bible tells us to do, while we're beating people over the head with the Bible, telling them how big of sinners they are. That same book tells us to go into the hedges and highways. That means go outside your comfort zone, go outside and compel. And you compel or you invite by showing compassion, number one. And as you mentioned, the church that mom and dad built, your mom and papa built. I was going to say my mom and papa. They went, we went door to door witnessing to people's houses. We didn't say, oh, these houses are too nasty or we don't want to go. we were in the neighborhood and the people knew who we were. And we went door to door witnessing to people, sharing what we knew to be the gospel and that God loved them no matter what. They also had street services where we would go out and set up on the street with the musicians and everybody and have services out on the street. We also, I remember there was a camp down in Pittsfield. I think it was like migrant workers, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was a camp, and we would go there and do services. We, like you said, we had bus trips where everybody was invited, and 90% of the people didn't have any money to pay for the trip. So mom and dad always came out of their pocket with the money. And I'm not just referring to the people in the neighborhood. I mean, the people in the church were all, most of them were saying they didn't have money. And mom and dad were of the mentality, well, it's a church trip. We want everybody to go. So if you don't have the money, come on, we'll take care of it. They also did a lunch program where people could come in during the daytime and people in the community could come in and get lunch. I remember also them doing a fatherhood program that was funded by the state for fathers who I think were recently re-entering society from prison so that they could have a safe place to reunite with their children and spend time with their children. So they set up the church as a center where these men could come and spend time with their children. Because they care so much about people and about the community, I remember mom even went and got a substance abuse counseling certificate from Warwick. And she was, I think, like the oldest person in her class. And I remember when she had her graduation, and for whatever reason, every graduation you go to, I don't care if it's pre-K, middle school, high school, college, they're always telling people to be quiet when your person's name is called, which is such a waste because you know what that person went through to get to this point. So, of course, we had church members there. We had people from the community there. The family was there. We had signs and banners, all kinds of things, congratulating Pastor Green for graduating with this certificate. So she not only just said out of her mouth, I love people. She did what she needed to do to be able to help people who had a specific need. Daddy was not known for being the lovey-dovey, hugging everybody person, but he would literally give the shirt off his back. I've heard people say that as a cliche, but I've seen my parents go in their closets and in their dresser drawers and take their clothes and put them in bags and give them away. So, as you said, the community knew them not as the people that have that church over there up on the hill, but they were known as Reverend Green with the church on the hill that fed my family when we didn't have any food, that gave my mom some money so that we could have some lights on. So this is a big piece of what's missing in our communities today with our churches as well. You and I were talking also about Dr. Umar Johnson. And those of you who are listening that don't know him, never heard of him, whatever, I highly recommend that you Google him and listen to what he has to say. You may not agree with every single word, but people don't agree with every single word you say either, or me. But there is information in there that can really change the lives of our people, the trajectory of our people. So I want you to talk a little bit about Dr. Johnson, and I want you to talk about the video clip that he did entitled White Jesus Money.
Okay, so again, salute to the brother Umar Johnson. because he's doing work for the people in order to uplift and build a legacy of people that have been stolen and that, quite honestly, is lost to the mass majority of our people. So, again, salute to him. And like when you just said, people may not agree with everything that he said. And before I get into that, a bit of advice for our people. You need to stop deciding whether or not you're going to agree with something based on your emotion or because it goes something against what you've been told all of your life.
Yes,
You
yes.
need to stop deciding you're going to agree to something based on whether or not it's true. And is it going to help you be in a better position than you're in now?
Right, right.
So that's another thing that we stop doing as a people. Just overlooking something that's the truth because it hurts our feelings or upset the status quo. But what he was discussing was, as far as people go to church every Sunday and they're giving offerings, and it's the same community again that you see the highest levels of poverty in. How is it that the church coffers continue to be filled, but yet the community that you're supposed to serve has the most poverty, not only in the country, but in most of the civilized world?
Right.
So he went on to explain, we had to start putting these leaders of the church to the test and asking, where is this Jesus money going? So he explained that when you give this money in the offering, what the church does is it takes this money that you have been given and it goes to we say Albion, but for the sake of understanding, it takes it to a white-owned bank.
Right.
And when your money goes to a white-owned bank, these are the same banks that you can't get a loan in. These are the same banks that give extraordinarily high interest rates on mortgages and what have you when they do decide to do business with you.
Right.
But you are the one who is funded one of the biggest institutions of your enslavement. So he talked about how the old lady has been giving money to this church for 50 years, giving this Jesus money. And then a developer, a land developer, a white land developer who went and got a loan from that white-owned bank that is being generated and funded by your money. The white landowner comes in that same community and starts to build up businesses that are there to serve other white people.
Right.
And what that means is gentrification. So now, the lady that's been given that money all those years is now uprooted and put out on the street. And it all was funded by that Jesus money that's given every Sunday all around the country. So he was explaining to people, again, while we get caught up in these emotional arguments and debates, we have to start looking at reality and questioning what is really going on behind the scenes when it comes to our welfare. And just real quick, right? One of the biggest problems with that as well is people seem to either not know or want to look past how the black church even started. So I would remind you people that when the black church started, remember, Christianity, as we know it, was not the first form of Christianity or being a follower of Yahushua or Jesus.
Right.
Because actually the oldest known congregation you will find is in Ethiopia. Used to be called Abyssinia, but it's called the Coptic Church. That is the oldest known church on the planet right now. This form of evangelical Christianity that we get and receive over here in this Western Hemisphere during the time of slavery is so far off from what the true teachers are about. That's why the spirit of that continuously shows itself every single day in the negligence of people who are claiming to be followers of Christ.
My Lord.
The versions that we receive taught people to be docile, continuously wait for some pie in the sky, but suffer hell on earth, and to never expect to be better than your slave master. So what some of our ancestors did during those times was that, okay, we're going to start our own congregation, because we couldn't even go amongst those white churches and even sit in there and worship God. Oftentimes the preachers were the leaders of the Ku Klux Klan and hanging you from trees and killing your women, cutting babies out of their stomach.
That's right.
Some of our men and women during that time had the courage and vision from the Creator to start our own congregation. And so the spirit of how the Black church started is based in that revolutionary fire, again, that you read about Jesus every time you look in the scripture.
That's right.
So our ancestors during this time understood that fire. They went out, built that, and they served one another. But even when you look at the history of that, you always had those sellouts and what they term house niggas that was always saying, well, look, master, we not with them. We rather just be slaves to you. And so you see, I did it still playing out over and over again. So we really are in need of real men and real women of God to step up and start to live out what you're claiming to believe.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we talk about, how we are programmed to, if you're a Christian, that means you have to be docile. If you're a Christian, that means you have to turn the other cheek. If you're a Christian, that means you don't want to stir up any confusion. You just, let people just do whatever, and God will take care of them. Because the Bible said, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Like, we got all these scripture references for why we're just being beat up, walked on, kicked in the head, stood on, all of that. But we don't study these scriptures in context. We don't take the time to do anything other than repeat and regurgitate what we've been told all of our lives. And at this point, it is way past time for us to unlearn some of this stuff and really understand who we are as a people and what we deserve to have as a people. And so, as we conclude this particular time of sharing, and we will definitely continue this conversation, I was thinking also about when we were talking about the origin of expressions, even with our religious gatherings, and how, we dance and we call it shouting in the Holiness Church. Because I remember when we were younger and we went to a church, like one of those really, really, really holy churches. and we kept referring to it as dancing. And they said that term, that term was too worldly, so we had to say shouting. So the next time you and I get together, I want to talk about the expression of your spirituality with its African roots.
Yes, man.
All right. Again, I thank you so much for joining me, and we will talk again a little later.
Yes, man. You have 30 seconds remaining. Family love.
Family is forever.